welcome to the Crisis Report. I'm Penny Hess, and I'm here to talk to other white people about critical issues of our time, about the crisis of imperialism, and I want to talk to you through the lens of African internationalism and Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who leads the Uhuru movement and the African People's Socialist Party. Please subscribe to Uhuru Solidarity YouTube page or channel, and also to our Facebook, like it. We are broadcasting from both today. So I'm the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, and that is the organization of white people formed by and working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. The African People's Socialist Party is the organization of African people that recognizes that black people, any place in the world, who have been forcibly dispersed around the world through the assault on Africa and the enslavement of African people, and African people inside Africa itself are all Africans, that they are one African people, not hyphenated, that they are Africans, and that the continent of Africa is their birthright, and they are working for the total liberation and unification of Africa and African people everywhere. So the African People's Solidarity Committee is an organization formed by the African People's Socialist Party and Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who is my leadership, who I want to salute today. And the goal, the work of the African People's Solidarity Committee is to go into the white community, to be the voice of black power in white face, to bring the African revolution inside the belly of the beast, to organize other white people, to look at the world as it really is, and not just be about explaining the world, but about changing it under the leadership of African and colonized peoples, and to go into the white community to organize for reparations to African peoples. That's what we're about. You can find out a lot more about the Uhuru Solidarity Movement on our YouTube channel, where we have scores of videos from past events and other kinds of things that we've done, and also on our Facebook page. So we want to talk about this question today. I also want to say that this whole understanding that the crisis of imperialism is key to the situation of the world today was put forward by Chairman Omali Yeshitela in his book published in 2014 called An Uneasy Equilibrium: The African Revolution versus Parasitic Capitalism. This was the political report to the African People's Socialist Party's 6th Congress, and the chairman defines what he calls this uneasy equilibrium as this struggle, this balance, this war between the haves and the have-nots, between the oppressor and the oppressed, between the colonizers and the colonized, that defines the world today. And as chairman has told us, that it is the resistance of African and colonized people here and around the world that has created this intense and very evolving political and economic crisis that we see inside the United States, inside of US imperialism today. So today, you know, we look at the newspaper and it's everything Trump. Trump is in the news. And impeachment is the word that's being bandied about in the media, and the possibilities of indictment of Trump as we've seen this drama play out. And, you know, I just want to also mention that we're going to be reading a little bit from the political report to the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party, which is coming up in October in St. Louis, October 6th through the 12th. You can find out more about that at apspuhuru.org. And that the chairman has been reading from that political report every Sunday. If you go to hashtag Omali Taught Me, or to the chairman's Facebook page, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, you will be able to find out how to watch him, this historic reading of this political report that's summing up the entire world, many, many questions and issues, that is forwarding the African Revolution that will blow your mind, because this is something that thinks out of the box, that is not in the context of reform or making things better under the system, but by saying that the system has to go, and that the struggle is for African and oppressed people to have the return of their land, their resources, and the value of their stolen labor. This is the inevitable course of history. So the chairman is reading this, and I'm going to read a little bit, some excerpts from chapter 4 of the political report that the chairman is in the process of reading right now. He read this chapter a couple of weeks ago, but here he talks about Trump. He's summing it up, and this chapter is called The Deepening Crisis of Imperialism, the Tipping Point of the Uneasy Equilibrium. So the chairman's saying the Trump regime is not fundamentally different from the Obama regime that preceded it, and it is certainly not a departure from the predatory colonial capitalist campaign of Hillary Clinton, Trump's 2016 Democratic Party opponent, whose loss to Trump sent shockwaves through the white ruling class elite. So that's a pretty strong statement there for a lot of people who haven't thought about this, but this is what we're going to be talking about today. The fact that as the chairman says, the elections are a nonviolent contest between sectors of the ruling class for control of the state. And this is what we're seeing unfold in the whole Trump regime. So you're saying, what? Trump is not fundamentally different than the Obama regime? Well, yeah, Obama launched 80 drone strikes a day on the average under during his 8 years in office. Obama gave $13 trillion to banks, to the ruling class. Under Obama, the police were just as violent and murderous against the African community as they've ever been. And he never took a stand for reparations to African people. He never took a stand even on the side of African people who have been murdered by the police. He took the stand on the side of the police. And, you know, we saw so many demonstrations under Obama's watch. We saw the murder of Mike Brown in St. Louis, and so many other, you know, Freddie Gray, so many other examples of this colonial violence that we're talking about. And, you know, it was under Obama that we also see the continuation of the mass incarceration and imprisonment of African people inside the United States, which make up 50% of the U.S. prison population, which is the largest, the greatest prison population in the entire world, so much so that 1 out of every 8 prisoners in the entire world is an African inside the borders of the United States. So Obama carried this out, and he was a result, as the chairman says, of the crisis of imperialism. They had to put a face of imperialism that looked more like the majority of the people on the planet Earth, and that's what Obama did. So, you know, I just want to continue with what the chairman is saying. The chairman says, is in this chapter, he's saying, we have said all along that the electoral process is simply a vehicle for nonviolent struggle by contending sectors of the colonial capitalist ruling class for control of the state for their own profit-making advantage. Nothing, he says, clarifies this fact more than the 2016 U.S. presidential campaign and Trump's election. So I just want to say that he is referring to this system and the ruling class as colonial capitalist. Colonial capitalist. Why is he saying that? He's saying that because he is making the point that capitalism was built on colonialism. That capitalism didn't emerge as a benign system in Europe that suddenly went bad and became imperialist. Capitalism was, as the chairman makes a point he makes very clearly in this book, An Uneasy Equilibrium, and in his new political report as well, that capitalism was born of imperialism. It was born of imperialism because Europe was poor, it was oppressed, and it saved itself, it rescued itself by leaving the shores of Portugal and Spain at first and venturing out to Africa, the coast of Africa, where it invaded Africa. It stole the gold of Africa, and then it began raiding and kidnapping African people, turning it into the most lucrative commodity of the system that became capitalism. So capitalism was born of colonialism. It would not exist without the assault on Africa, without the theft of African human beings, without the turning of African people into commodities, without the settler colonialism of the US and the theft of the land of the indigenous people and the genocide against them. There would be no capitalism. So many people tried to cover this over and say that that was an anomaly. No, that was the foundation of the system. And so that's why the chairman calls it the colonial capitalist ruling class. And it's really clarifying and really important for us to understand this. So the chairman says, the state, because he's saying that the election is a non-violent contest between sectors of the ruling class for control of the state. We, as white people, tend to not see the state, not want to see it, but the chairman is saying the state is the organ of coercion, utilized by the ruling class to protect the system of colonial capitalism. It is clearly the police, the courts, the jails, and other repressive institutions where violence can be used if a person does not adhere to the will of the state, whether inside the borders of the United States or around the world. Around the world, it's the military. Inside the US, it is the police. So the chairman's saying that it is also the military and various intelligence components associated with it. The state is the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and the assorted secret police agencies about which most people know nothing. The state has existed, the chairman continues, since society split into irreconcilable classes, into groups locked into a relationship of the exploited and the exploiters, where the exploiters live at the expense of others. The chairman said, the European imperialist invasion of Africa, Asia, and the lands now known as the Americas created the new capitalist social system. It created it. Think about your history. Go back and read your history. Go back and read your history. The books that we learned from in school try to tell us that, oh, the capitalist economy was born of people, maybe cobblers and different kinds of craftspeople in Europe who just got bigger and bigger and bigger. But that's not the way the world works. It needs capital infusion. And that capital infusion, which Karl Marx called the primitive accumulation of capital, or the first accumulation of capital, came through the assault on Africa, as we have laid out here. And the chairman just makes this so clear. And this created the state. And I want to say that it also created the pedestal upon which all white people live today. This is why we have the highest standard of living in the world. This is why the state is friendly to us, but hostile and murderous, and locking up African people, Mexican people, and indigenous and oppressed peoples around the world. That's why we have a different relationship to the state. In fact, we ourselves have been and are part of the state, what the chairman calls the white people's state. So let me read a little bit more about that. The chairman is saying Now the state was no longer simply an instrument of coercion directed at protecting and maintaining a power of a social system within the boundaries of a specific European territory. The capitalist state now created structures that protected and projected the interests of the bourgeoisie in faraway places. This was a bourgeoisie made possible by the primary features of what Karl Marx termed the primitive accumulation of capital, or the first accumulation of capital. Where did this wealth, where did all this gold, this wealth, this power, and to become the richest system, the richest continent, Europe, and now North America, on the face of the earth, it did not come from white people working hard and saving their money. It came from Europe assaulting and stealing from not Africa, the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean and what is now called the Americas, and the Asian, Arab, and oppressed people spanning the globe, the world imperialist system. So the chairman said this is the genesis of the capitalist system itself. The capitalist state was born of Europe, but it has always had a global capacity, flowing from its parasitic and predatory origin. Contrary to the notion that, quote, globalization is a new historical phenomenon, capitalism was born as a world system, and the capitalist state was born as an international state power. Can you get that? That is really, really important for us to understand that imperialism is a world system. In Europe, imperialism and capitalism manifest themselves as the highest standard, the high technology, very affluent state. But in Africa, in parts of Asia, and for indigenous peoples in the Americas, capitalism manifests itself as poverty, as dependency, as colonialism, as a people without power over their lives. It is the same system with two different ways of seeing it. The chairman states further, the bourgeois electoral process was designed to protect the colonial capitalist system from destruction by internecine war between capitalist predators competing for resources and markets. In this way, the electoral process functions as a component of colonialist capitalist state power. In the 2016 U.S. presidential election was also a white ruling class contest for control of the colonial capitalist state. It was a contest that was clothed in bourgeois idealism designed to cloak the intention and interest of the minority white ruling class in order to win mass support from white people. The ability of the white masses to vote for their ruling class masters obscures the dictatorship of white rulers. This ability to vote has come to define democracy in the US and for much of the white capitalist-dominated world. So, we just add that the chairman said, also wrote in this section, the contenders for the presidency during the 2016 elections represented different sectors of the white ruling class. As Trump declared at every opportunity, all the candidates in 2016 were hirelings of big money. Their individual political programs advanced during the campaign represented the different positions of their big moneyed employers who needed control of the US state to realize their aims. Imperialism continues to exist, writes the chairman. Colonial capitalism continues to be the dominant social system on earth. However, there is an uneasy equilibrium where the struggles of the oppressed and colonized peoples of the world calls into question everything that shaped the political and economic features of the world. This crisis has reached its tipping point. So this crisis is playing itself out in all of the drama and the news and the betrayals and the snitching and all kinds of things that we're seeing every single day with the Trump administration, where a sector of the ruling class and basically is attacking Trump because he didn't play the game, because he came in as an outsider and he had his own resources, and he is attempting to break up alliances that the chairman goes into quite a bit. The Atlantic or the Atlanticist alliance that has been in force for the last 70 or 80 years in this country, that and the world, that that Trump is breaking up and attempting to create new alliances through a ruling class, but he did not do this through the way that the ruling class and the state has defined. So this is really, really, really important for us to understand. And I wanted to just say that one thing that both sectors of the ruling class of the United States agree upon is the colonial violence and domination of African people in this country. And I thought it was interesting today, on the front page of the New York Times was an article that said Trump's war on the justice system threatens to erode trust in the law. So this is a very interesting article. It said, it is a once unimaginable scenario. Sometime soon in an American courtroom, a criminal defense lawyer may argue that the prosecution of an MS-13 gang member is a politically motivated witch hunt built around a witness who has flipped and taken what the lawyer calls a plea deal of dubious legality. He will be quoting the President of the United States. That is potentially the gravest danger of President Trump's sustained verbal assault on the country's justice system, legal experts say. In his attempt at self-defense amid the swirl of legal cases and investigations involving himself, his aides, and his associates, Mr. Trump is directly undermining the people and processes that are the foundation of the nation's administration of justice. The result is a president at war with the law. Quote, you are dealing with a potentially indelible smearing of our law enforcement institutions, said Neil K. Catal, who was acting Solicitor General under President Barack Obama. If Trump's views were actually accepted, there would be thousands of criminals who are out on the street right now. So basically what they're saying, and this is supposedly from the liberal bourgeoisie, this is supposed to be supposedly from the liberal sector, the New York Times, of the white ruling class. What they're saying is that Trump is very dangerous because it will not allow, it may break open this reality that the US has criminalized impoverished Mexican, African, and Salvadoran and other colonized people inside the borders of the United States by calling them a gang and criminals, and saying that somebody might raise that this is a witch hunt, which it is a colonial attack on African and colonized people inside the borders of the United States. It's not racism, it's colonialism that does this. It is the state acting upon African and oppressed people, using this term of the gang, and saying that that people might have used a witness that has flipped and taken what the lawyer calls a plea deal of dubious legality. So this is what they're already using against African and oppressed people, and they're saying that what Trump is saying may undermine that. And it's really interesting and ridiculous that they have a quote saying that if Trump's views were actually accepted, there would be thousands of criminals who are out on the street right now. There are thousands of criminals out on the street right now, and they're in the White House, they're in Wall Street, they're just walking the streets of Washington, D.C., and any place that the ruling class is. There are criminals in the Pentagon, there are criminals in police departments, there are criminals that are murdering oppressed people, the people of Yemen right now, who are bombing, who are in there waging war, such as AFRICOM in Africa, wars of colonial oppression, wars of the theft of resources. There are criminals that are gunning down African people and young people, people of all ages right now, even as we speak inside the borders of the United States. But it is this system that has attempted to criminalize Africans under the guise of so-called gangs. The same system, in fact, it was the Democrat under Clinton and Hillary Clinton herself that used the term that young African people are super predators, criminalizing an entire generation of African young people and the entire African community under terms like this, justifying the murder and the mass incarceration, not only of African people as a whole, but certainly of young people as well. So this term is a gang. I don't know what is a gang. I know that African people and Mexican people are struggling to live and survive in a system that starves them, that arrests them, that tracks them down, that steals their resources, keeping them from working, takes everything from them, that attacks them in the schools, and every possible form of the reality of colonialism that African and indigenous people face inside the borders of the United States today, and that we as white people have not taken a stand to stop this, to stand in solidarity with the struggle of African people, to have control over the lives and resources, the struggle of indigenous people to have this land back because it is their land, and that we as white people have to stop. We have to jump off this pedestal. We have to break our bonds with this system that is built on white power, that is built on suffering, rape, and pillage, and join in solidarity with the people on the planet Earth. That's what we have to talk about. I don't want to hear about reform. I don't want to hear about a struggle against racism, which is something that is an attempt, a crazy attempt to say that African people have to change the way they think and join white society. I want to stand in solidarity of the right of African people to self-government and to have their own state, to make sure that anybody with racist ideas in their heads will never hurt them again, that they will have power over their lives. And that's why we stand for reparations to African people, the return of their stolen resources. This is the way. This is the way. So I want you to really think about what we've discussed today, to open up, to be able to see the world as it really is, and to abandon this pedestal upon which we sit at the expense of everybody else. So, I'm calling on you to take a stand for reparations, to join in solidarity with the African Revolution, to be able to pay reparations at blackpowerblueprint.org. Go to blackpowerblueprint.org, and you can pay reparations to an amazing project for political and economic power in the hands of the African working class that is developing overnight in the north side of St. Louis, Missouri, under the leadership of Deputy Chair Onezene Shatella and Chairman Omalia Shatella. Check out our other videos on the Uhuru Solidarity Facebook page and YouTube channel. Please Go to hashtag O'Malley Taught Me on Facebook and find out how to watch Chairman O'Malley Shatella himself every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern. We can't just explain the world, we've got to be part of changing the world. Join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, take the reparations challenge, join a growing base, thousands of other white people who have participated in some way in taking a stand for reparations to African people who say, I'm another white person for reparations to African people, returning the stolen resources. We want to end our historic relationship to white power. We want to rectify our historic relationship to African people. We want to be part of creating a world in which all human beings can live in peace, no one at the expense of anybody else, under the leadership of the organized African working class and the African Revolution. So I want to say Uhuru, see you next week, and unity through reparations.